Hello, the Pioneer viewers. How are you doing? I hope you're healthy and well. The Pioneer team is back with a new episode of Map Reports. In a moment, we will discuss the latest developments on the front line. As you know, the situation in Avdiivka is quite critical. The Ukrainian armed forces are unfortunately cornered in Avdiivka. Ukrainian troops are currently fighting surrendered on 3 fronts. Of course, nothing is over. Ukrainian resistance is still very strong. Moreover, the Ukrainian resistance have become even stronger with the recent shipment. Azov battalion, one of the architects of the Mariupol resistance, is now serving in Avdiivka. So, what is the general situation on the front line, especially in Avdiivka? Let's examine it together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to convey our evaluations and reports on the Russia-Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. You can also support me and my hardworking team by using the super thanks button below the videos. Let's start if you are ready. The Pioneer reports. Let's start with the latest developments on Zaporizhia front line. According to the latest reports, there is heavy fighting west of the village of Robotyne and north of Novoprokopivka. These clashes have now become quite normal. However, this normalcy will surely be disrupted, because the resistance of the Ukrainian army has still not been broken despite all the efforts of the Russian army. Therefore, we can talk about the demoralization in the Russian army. On the other hand, the Russian armed forces are trying to expand the front line. Let us remember, if the front line expands, the defense line becomes thinner. So the Russian army is trying to apply the same strategy that the Ukrainian army used before. Novoprokopivka is being targeted for this. According to the latest reports, units of the Russian armed forces launched an offensive from the direction of Novoprokopivka. However, this attack was repelled by the defenders of the Ukrainian armed forces. Let's continue with the artillery activity in the area. According to the latest reports, artillery units of the Russian armed forces shelled Ukrainian armed forces positions in Mali-Shorbiansky, Novodanilovka, Malaya-Tokmakcha, Krasnoye and Malinkovna. In contrary, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces hit the positions of the Russian armed forces in Novoprokopivka, Verbov, Novofedorovka and Novopokrovka. Now let's briefly touch on the Vuhledar front. Obviously, this front line is one of the most strategic points of the war, because no real changes have been taken place here for about 4 months, and the troops of the both armies have been in the same borderline positions for a long time. The Ukrainian army still has the advantage, but because they have not lost psychological superiority. There have been attacks here that were critical for the Russian army. However, these attacks did not lead to any success, which caused the Russian army to turn to tables. The current situation, the Russian army cannot be expected to make more progress. The Russian army made a lot of effort, especially in the Stormyorsk and Yorkhain attacks. However, when it became clear that these efforts were not yielding any results, the strategy was changed and the focus was shifted to Pryotny. But here too, the Russian army failed to achieve any success in these attacks in the north of the region. In the end, this allowed the Ukrainian army to maintain the psychological superiority. In the last situation in the region, we see a similar scenario repeating itself. According to reports, the infantry-based offensive of the Russian armed forces in the vicinity of Yorkhain and Stormyorsk has been largely resolved. They are mostly carrying out attacks through the artillery units. In addition, the Ukrainian armed forces are responding to these artillery attacks and continuing the fight against the Russian troops. When we look at the artillery activity in the region, we see that the Russian army is generally working on Yorkhain and Stormyorsk. The Ukrainian army, on the other hand, is targeting Russian checkpoints south of these two areas. Now let me continue with the most important point, the Donetsk front line. In fact, according to the latest reports, things are critically bad for the Ukrainian armed forces on the Donetsk front line. But this situation is mutual, because things are not completely good for the Russian army forces either. But for a moment, it is possible to say that the Russian army has the upper hand. According to the latest reports, troops of the Russian armed forces attacked Novomikhailivka from the southeast, which led to their deployment on the outskirts of the settlement. There are logistics for forward troops, but in open terrain. This is the main advantage of the Ukrainian army, which from the very beginning of the fighting in the area wanted the area to be flat. This means that the Russian troops face more casualties. Given the activity use of FPV drones by the Ukrainian army, the Russian army may face major problems. In particular, the fact that the settlement is held by the Ukrainian Armed Forces paratroopers poses a major problem for the Russian army. In the last day, the Russian armed forces attacks near Pobeda, Robotyne and Permovskoye were not successful, but on the southern outskirts of the Avdiivka, they closed the Ukrainian Zenit fortifications in the ring. Here is the big risk. The Ukrainian armed forces could be trapped here, surrendered. It is reported that only less than 800 meters remain for a full encirclement. But the most important thing we know so far is that the Ukrainian armed forces will not retreat from here. To the northwest of Avdiivka, units of the Russian armed forces have cut the main logistic routes for the Ukrainian garrison in the city. This is also a big problem. The forward positions of the Russian assault troops are 500 meters to the west. In this situation, the command of the Ukrainian armed forces have only two options, either to counterattack or leave the city. Which one they will choose, we don't know yet, but we hope success. The fact that the Azov battalion has been deployed here is strengthening the possibility of the counterattack by the Ukrainian army, but it is not possible to say anything definite at the moment. Only time will tell us. Let's look at the latest situation on the Bakhmut front line. According to reports, the Russian armed forces continue to conduct offensive operations near Ivaniivsky and in the Bogdanivka area. However, these operations have still not yet yielded results. Ukrainian armed forces troops are still holding their positions. On the Luhansk front line, furious counterattacks are taking place, especially near Belgorovka. We see that the units of the Russian armed forces are trying to advance near Novoprokopivka and Terniv. However, they did not succeed. The Ukrainian armed forces are trying to counterattack near Zaporizhia. They have already recaptured several positions here. In the case of counterattack, in the coming days, we can talk about the Ukrainian gains. In addition, the Russian armed forces are maintaining pressure on the Ukrainian positions northwest of Sinkiivka, but no border changes have been reported so far. So, what do you think? Do you think the Ukrainian armed forces will launch a counteroffensive on the Donetsk front line? Or do you think the Azov battalion will be effective? How might the Russian control of the Avdiivka affect the war? Specify it in the comments, because I read and I care, and I personally respond to all of your comments.